So, kaya everyone. Hello from Wajak Noongar Budja. I'm here. I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land, now called Australia, but was and always will be Aboriginal land, and pay respects to all First Nations peoples in their struggles for human rights. Welcome everyone to this Human Rights Education webinar on this significant day, an international day for the right to truth concerning gross human rights violations and for the dignity of victims. I'm Linda Blanchard. I work with the Australian Council for Human Rights Education, and my colleagues and co-organisers of this webinar, Dr. Azim Zahir and Dr. Yiga Diaz, are my colleagues here. My role as moderator is to introduce you all amazing panelists that I met the other night. Each speaker will have about 10 minutes to share with us their experiences and insights regarding the topic for today, the human rights violations of the Amhara people. After which we'll have about 10 minutes of Q&A and discussion. And this webinar is also being recorded. So I do have this little small peace bell to tinkle if time gets away from us. But now to our panelists. Let me introduce our panelists. Sinead Sinai is the director and co-founder of the volunteer-based NGO Genocide Prevention in Ethiopia, an initiative that is established to raise awareness about the ongoing genocide against Amaras and other alarming, rampant ethnic-based atrocities in Ethiopia. Sinead is adjunct assistant professor in biosecurity and a full-time researcher at the University of Minnesota, USA. She has in the past worked for UN agencies and has consistently volunteered for human rights causes. Thank you, Sinead, for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
And Yure Jerusalem Teseme, I'm doing my best with your names, everybody. Tesem Ma is an Ethiopian journalist and human rights activist currently living in exile after fleeing political persecution. Her work focuses on documenting and raising awareness about human rights violations in Ethiopia, particularly those affecting the Amhara people, through journalism, advocacy, and engagement with international platforms. She seeks to amplify the voices of victims, defend freedom of expression, and promote accountability for abusers. Jerusalem continues to work with civil society and diaspora networks to bring global attention to the ongoing human rights crisis in Ethiopia. Thank you for joining us tonight. We look forward to hearing from all these panelists. Youssef, hello Youssef, is an Ethiopian writer, media practitioner, and commentator focusing on human rights, ethnic politics, and religious freedom in Ethiopia. Youssef has over 8 years of experience in media, worked from entry-level reporting to management roles, and has continued his work independently through digital platforms while in exile for the past 4 years. He is the author of several books, including The Ethnic Politics of the Oromo and Ethiopian Nationalism. His work and commentary frequently addresses structural violence, policy dynamics, and the systemic persecution of Orthodox Christians and the Amhara community in Ethiopia. Thank you, Youssef, for joining us. Dr. Birhan Bilete is a medical doctor who graduated with distinction and is currently advancing expertise through the Erasmus Mundus Public Health in Disasters program. With clinical experience spanning emergency and inpatient care across multiple institutions, she's also served as a lecturer and researcher at Wallow University College of Medicine and Health Sciences. Passionate about global health and disaster management, Birhan is committed to strengthening health systems and making a meaningful impact on public health worldwide. Thank you for joining us, Birhan. First time for us to meet. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, Linda, and everyone.
And Rebel, over to hello, Rebel, serves as a senior analyst and director of communications for the Amhara Association of America. Established in 2016, AAA is an advocacy organization representing communities of Amhara Ethiopian descent or heritage in North America. AAA produces independent reporting covering conflict, violence, and political repression in Ethiopia, and regularly collaborates with partner organizations to deliver humanitarian relief to affected communities. Rebel has worked with AAA since 2021, helping to manage a team of human rights consultants to compile, analyze, and publish casualty recording data on a regular basis. Additionally, his work has involved digital content creation and engagements with stakeholders in government, research institutions, and various international media organizations. Rebel most recently completed his doctorate at the Institute of Medical Science at the University of Toronto, and he comes tonight from Canada, I think, Rebel. Thank you for joining us, Rebel. And our last panelist is Graham Peebles, who's an independent writer and charity worker. His essays are widely published on leading alternative media outlets throughout the world. Formerly photographer and fine artist, he set up the Creative Trust 2005 and has run education projects in India, Ethiopia, where he lived for 2 years, Sri Lanka, and Palestine. He has made 2 short documentaries about Ethiopia, most recently the award-winning film We're Still Breathing, Amhara Genocide in Ethiopia. So thank you to Graham, if he's there, for joining us tonight as well. If we keep questions and comments to the end, and you can write any comments or questions in the chat along the way as we listen to our panelists. And then we'll have time at the end for our discussion. So we're really honoured to have all of you together with us. I can't believe the array of experience in our 6 panelists. And Sinead, we're going to start with you, if that's okay. And human rights abuses facing the Amhara people have been ongoing for some time. Can you please give us a general picture of how and why the Amhara people are targeted in Ethiopia? What are some of the compelling, some of your compelling findings about that?
Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. Thank you, Linda, everyone, Azim and the colleagues, Dr. Yegad, the center, everyone for organizing such a very informative and a very useful platform. It's a very wide topic, but I'll try to cover it very, very wide and deep to cover in 10 minutes, but I'll do my best to show you the highlights. So I want to focus on showing, this is, we came from the age of picture, so it didn't happen. basically on internet culture where people have to show some kind of evidence videos to show something happened. But now we're getting into an age of AI. Pictures are told to be, this is AI, this is doctored, etc. So now, rather than focusing just on slides and showing you pictures and videos, we're going to logically lay down the facts, how such a big atrocity, such huge human rights violation that went on for over 3 decades happened undercover, because usually such a destruction, a humanitarian destruction of human crimes of this magnitude usually should have been covered somehow internationally. So today what I'm going to try and show you is how systemic it is, how horrific it is, how it could gaslight you to a point where you think maybe you're imagining it. And I'll try to lay down with the fact that how systematically the Amhara people are targeted in Ethiopia, but then with a focus of how it is also very difficult for people who are trying to expose the crime to get recognized globally. And this is all not because advocates are not trying to do it, not because there is no evidence, but because part of the signature of Amhara genocide is there is not only a systematic and coordinated targeting, but also there is also a systematic disinformation associated with each incident, so that each time when an incident occurs, the perpetrator is altered in terms of when the information is communicated, and the victim itself is altered. If I may say, I would say this is a very unique behavior of Amhara genocide. So let's just talk about how were they targeted in the past. This is not something new. It's something that went over 35 years. But why did it flare up so much now? It's because it has 2 stages. There is a rapid onset phase of it, and there is a slow onset phase of it. The slow onset genocide started 35 years ago when we have this ethnic federalism system imposed in Ethiopia. This happened because a group of forces who wanted to separate from Ethiopia, organized based on ethnic groups, came and instead of actually finalizing their plan and separating, they ended up governing Ethiopia. So they turned it into, ethnic-based states. For centuries, Ethiopia was made of just like provinces, not ethnic-based. And overnight, over a matter of 2 or 3 years, it just changed into ethnically segregated ethnic states. Within that, what happened against the Amhara people? I'll give you 4 specific examples how it systematically removed millions of Amharas. The first one is, given that the targeting is state-sponsored, the whole power of the government propaganda mission was able to propagate that Amharas are settlers, oppressors, and that they don't belong. Programming was done through formal education and other informal gatherings like speeches, meetings, even parliamentary debates. The first prime minister through this system, Tramrat Laine, literally went on location and rallied for the attack of Amharas before a major ethnic targeting happened in 1992. The next Prime Minister Meles Zenawi actually justified in parliament the killing of hundreds of Amharas that happened in a place called Gogaferda. It's because they were expelled because they were destroying the environment, deforesting the area, etc. And this is just examples what happened during the slow onset genocide, which was officially and formally justified through parliamentary talks, through formal policies, through educational system. So this went on for the first 27 years of the TPLF-led, during the TPLF-led regime in Ethiopia. The second example, legal and policy support. Profiling and targeting was made possible due to mandatory government-issued ID cards that labeled citizen ethnic identity. So it's not only the government apparatus, but any radicalized group can make use of this genocidal infrastructure to identify, classify, and attack Amharas with laser-focused precision whenever a political upheaval occurs. Countless evidence that buses get stopped and ID cards were used to separate travelers where Amaras are executed on the spot. And this exists. We have evidence for this. Third, heavy-handed family planning practices, administration of long-acting contraception without the consent of Amhara girls and women was applied through government-sanctioned programs. And recently, we're getting information, actually, there were also programs that target young men as well. But the intact data that we have focuses on young women and girls. The government itself admitted that it could not locate 2.5 million Amharas after the 2007 census. Fourth, this is an example of the slow onset genocide again, dismantling of known and impactful disease prevention programs like the removal of the malaria prevention institution from the Amhara region that led to thousands of deaths in the region. So these are the examples that I can give you for the first 27 years. Then we got into the rapid onset. So the rapid onset, it's actually extremely excruciatingly horrific. This is when things are not hidden anymore. People are killed in huge droves and this is where, since the so-called reform came and Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed took office, what happened? Massacres in thousands in different hotspots where Amharas are known to live in high density, like in Welaga, in Matakal, in Gorafarda, in Jimma, around Addis Ababa, the capital city, and wherever there are political upheavals and war happen. Behind the hidden war, there is always Amhara targeting, like in North Corner, Amhara, in Maikadra, Raya, in Shawa, repeatedly. A Shawa town in the last 6 years have been burned completely 10 times with non-state actors doing it, with the backing of government actors. So when this happened, the examples are actual massacres, mass concentration camps, mass illegal detentions, and mass house demolitions. Just around Addis Ababa, 500,000 people were expelled in the past 4 years. That's 100,000 households. So how did it become so hidden? So the thing is, it's a long systemic exclusion throughout the system. Amharas were not politically represented through their own chosen. They didn't delegate their rights. It's the ruling parties that were organizing. They used to puppeteer Amhara representatives. There was a systemic elite removal. It's in any society, when you remove the elite and you disconnect it with the people, the educated ones, the ones at the top of society who have the platform to communicate this hurt, are systematically removed. When the system first was instituted, 42 Amhara professors were kicked out of Addis Ababa University. This is just an example because it's a landmark example. There was systemic policy-led targeting, like I said earlier. So these are all hidden systems, how it was hidden during the slow onset genocide. During the current, very rapid onset killing, you could say the hotspot areas are killing fields, and bodies are found everywhere. People are injured, devastated, starved. How is that this is not international news? Because there is a systemic disinformation apparatus that is supported by local media, and then the media is 95% monopolized in Ethiopia. And when that happened, what happens is human rights advocates are gaslighted, they are disillusioned. There is coordinated targeting and news fixers. Whenever there is incident happens, international foreign medias that operate also in local medias, like it used to be VOAs, now the funding is cut, but there is Deutsche Welle and BBC and others, but also those who communicate in foreign languages, French, English, etc. They are told in a coordinated matter, there is a disinformation where they are fixed with false information. We have evidence where, I'll just take a minute here, we have evidence where major human rights organizations like Amnesty International, like Human Rights Watch, took evidences and reported perpetrators, a different identity for perpetrators and a different identity for the blamed act, for the victims. And we actually, in a coordinated manner, managed to remove some of this such information where this information was injected, and such major massacre events were, reported as if it's a completely different, event. both the perpetrators and the victims changed. So later on, during the Q&A, maybe because I ran out of time, I would cover more. But one thing that is sure is that this left the Amhara people without support. Advocates and other resistance within the country kind of learned over the 3 decades that they have nobody. So the movement tried to be self-sufficient, and there is a lot of very quick acting advocacy that's happening that's trying to turn this into a global awareness. And I think this forum is also part of that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sinead. Thank you so much. And the hidden nature of the genocide is really writ large in what you were saying. And this is a segue over to you, Yuri Salam, joining us from Uganda, I think. As a journalist living in exile, can you please share with us a little of your experience and the experience of Amhara journalists in Ethiopia? As Sinead was saying, the media is almost, there's a monopoly on the media in Ethiopia. So if you can shed some light on that as a journalist living in exile and your experiences with journalists, Amhara journalists in Ethiopia. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone joining us today. So first, I would like to sincerely thank you, Australian Council for Human Rights Education and the Center for Human Rights Education at Curtin University for giving me this opportunity to speak and share my experience and creating this platform to amplify voices that would have been otherwise be silenced. So my story is not long ago. I used to live in Addis Ababa, where I worked as a news anchor. I stand before you today, not just as a journalist, but as a witness, someone who has seen, experienced it, and luckily escaped the realities. So while working in a state-affiliated media, I was repeatedly pressured to read news that I knew was false. I was asking to distort the truth, to erase identities, when innocent people were being killed in Walaga and other parts of Oromia, we were instructed to describe them simply as civilians. But I insisted on saying what was true, that they were targeted because they were Amharas. Even that truth became dangerous at times. So over time, it became clear that journalism, as I understood it, was no longer possible within that system. So I made the difficult decision to leave my position in that state-affiliated media. But leaving my job did not mean I was free, but instead, I became a target for the government forces. I started speaking independently, reported on suffering of displacement of communities, families who lost everything from Walaga, RC, and different parts of Oromia, their homes, their loved ones, their sense of safety. I visited internally displaced, the IDP camps, listened to survivors, and tried to give a voice to those who had been silenced. So fast forward, on April 12, 2024, the government accused me of involvement in a FANO operation in the capital city, Addis Ababa. So that accusation, that was entirely false. Just like many journalists in Amhara elites, I was charged with terrorism. That's what they do. A warrant was issued for my arrest. My bank account was frozen immediately, and I was forced into hiding. So I escaped I escaped the capital city to the Amhara region, to my families, to the place where I was born and raised. I stayed in areas not under government controls at the time. So there I continued my work, documenting the impact of drone attacks and the realities of the ongoing Amhara war. But even there, safety was temporary. As the fighting escalated, I was forced to move constantly from one place to another place, trying to avoid being captured by the government and trying to escape from the drone attack. After 4 months, I knew I couldn't live like that anymore. I changed my identity and traveled a very long and dangerous journey across the country with my two other colleagues who are journalists. I finally crossed the border into Kenya and made my way to Uganda finally, where I continued my work today. I'm still working in the media, trying to be a voice for my people, for the Amhara, and overall for the human beings. So I work with my colleagues at the 251 Media, which is aired on Mareja Television. But my story is only one among many. Today, as we speak, countless individuals remain behind bars in Ethiopia. Journalists, politicians, academics, and ordinary citizens detained because of their Amhara identity. Many have been held for months without charges in conditions that are inhuman and degrading. I want to share just one example among many. A fellow journalist who is my friend, Gennet Asmamaw, she is currently imprisoned and very sick. She has been denied medical care. She is the only child of her mother, just like me. Her mother had to leave her home in the countryside and move to Addis Ababa, a strange city which she never been, just to be close to her daughter, with no income and no support system. She struggles every day emotionally, financially, just to survive in a place that she doesn't know. This could have been me. The only difference is that I escaped. Today I'm alive, but many others are not as lucky. I want to speak the names of those who are no longer with us, those who died in detention. One of them is Isaias Belay. His story, it makes me emotional. He was detained in Samara, Afar region. He was tortured badly, so badly that he lost his life. His stomach was open at the time he died. No one should ever go through that. Another one is Abayna Halemayo Gasesa, whom I know. He was in Gilindo prison. He became very sick, but he was denied medical treatment. He died because he did not get the care he needed. This is a story. That's why I'm afraid for my friend Gannatas Mama, because just like Abayna Halemayo Gasesa was denied and died in the prison, I'm afraid she might be the same. Behind every name, there is a story. Behind every story is a family. And behind every family is a community that's grieving. The Amhara people are grieving. And at the same time, we are fighting, they're fighting for their survival. Over 292 documented Amhara political prisoners held in major federal prisons, such as Qilinto, Kaliti, Abba Samuel, and Zuwai. There are also many of my fellow journalists, my closest friends, who are still in prison today. I want to remember their name right now. Let me say some of their names. Meskerem Aberra, Dawit Begashaw, Abbay Zewdu, Gobeze Sisay, Todros Nibret, Mikael Melaka, Habtamu Mohammed, Tadios Tantu, and many, many others. As a journalist, I believe in truth. And the truth is, this is happening right now as we speak. But knowing the truth is not enough. What we need now is attention. We need acknowledgement. We need action. To everyone listening today, I ask you to remember that this is not a distant issue. It is a human issue. It is about people like you and me, people who had lives, careers, families, and dreams. I stand here today because I was able to escape, but many others could not. Many others are still waiting for justice, for recognition, and for freedom. Let us stand for justice. This is my story. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jerusalem, for your courageous and painful story that you're sharing with us. That was great courage by you to speak out, and I particularly love to hear the names of your colleagues and friends, and my heart goes out to the families and community. The call to action by you is strong, and thank you for making us sit up to these gross human rights violations and listen deeply to your story. Now I'd like to invite Yosef to talk more about the victims of followers of the ancient Ethiopian Orthodox. Is it Tewahedo Church, Joseph? You might share with us your testimony on this issue as an Oromo deacon of the Orthodox Church. Please tell us your experiences and share the experiences of the Orthodox believers in the Oromia and beyond. Why Orthodox believers are also targeted in this genocide.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Linda. And thank you also other speakers that also joined this highly valuable session. And Jerusalem's presentation made me so emotional because she was mentioning some of also my friends who have been in jail for the past more than 3 years, whom we know their innocence. So thank you. And you are right, that it is the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church. The name you are right with the name. And yeah, I'm also today, I'm not here as an expert or as an activist. I'm just here to share my witness, my own life experience, my journey is also highly connected with the what we are talking about today, about the gross human rights violations and also persecution of Orthodox Christians. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church issue also highly connected with the Amhara issue, as I'm going to show how it is being conducted on the ground. Many have been paying price because they are unorthodox, and because they are unorthodox, they just categorized as Amharas. And even most of the time, Oromia, a regional state, when atrocities and the mass massacres have been conducted against the Ethiopian Orthodox Church believers, the officials come out in the media publicly and they say that, do not say the people whom have been killed are unorthodox, they are Amharas, they say, as if killing Amhara is just legally acceptable or just something normal. And they just deny or prohibit us to not say Orthodox, but to say that it's ethnic killing, which are then they believe, the officials believe sometimes unintentional, I think. So let me give you a brief background of myself, which also tells you what I'm going to, what connects me with this story. And my name is Yosef Katama Kordofa. I was born in a region of Ethiopia, specifically Borada called Gindaberet, Western Shoa, Western Oromia. And I got from Oromo family, and also my mother tongue was also Oromic. And I've been in jail and also in exile right now due to I was speaking for the Amharas and also Orthodox genocide. And I was posing as an Oromo. This of my starts from my childhood, where I witnessed very terrible things. In the community I was born in, the majority is Oromo, and we have also significant number of Amharas and also others. And I want you to remember your childhood friends whom you have been brought up together. I had two of my friends, my childhood friends, whom I remember them throughout my lifetime. Those are
Yusuf, could you speak
yes?
closer to the microphone a little bit? It's a little bit hard to hear. So we're wondering if you can. That's better, I think.
Now good?
Yes, much better. Thank you.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'm speaking about my childhood friends, Sarah and Retta. Actually, this is the first time calling them with their real name. We have been brought up together. We have been neighbors, and their father was a teacher of us, and he used to teach more than 20 years in our school. And in 1993 Ethiopian calendar, that means 2000 in Gregorian calendar, there was as it was normal in that area where the political tension is highly volatile. We have annually protest against the government, which is led with the support for OLF, Oromo Liberation Army. And that year, it was around the middle of the year. During that protest day, we have been called out from the school, and there was everything, the instability. We didn't know that is going to happen that morning. When the mother of Sarah and Retta, she gave birth to twins, and it was only her second week. And we just went to school as any other normal day, but it became very different. And we have been told that we are going to dismantle or remove the enemies of Oromo, whom we didn't know that they are those people who have been called enemies are the people in between us. We didn't know that. And at some point of the protest, my older sister took me to home to ensure my safety. And after some minutes, I have seen teacher, the father of Sarah and Retta, being captured by police, and he was crying, and he was shouting and speaking that what I did to this society. Am I not part of this society? Am I did anything wrong to this society? I haven't been around with this society for so long. What we did, what my family did wrong. He was crying, and that was very strange for me as only 13 years old boy. And in that morning, I just went to their home, and I've seen that I couldn't trust my eyes. Everything, their house was burned down, and the Sarahs and Retta, their books, their exercise books, their clothes have been changed to ash, and all their yard, their house was. That was very terrifying. And I just came back to my father, and what's happened to them? And he was telling me that he was very angry. And I was telling him that these you students did that. Why? I was asking why. They said they are not. And I was responding, but they are speaking Oromo. Their father is our teacher. What they did wrong? And I was crying. And finally, he tried his best to answer my questions, but my question remained unanswered. Why? And that was the first incident that could make or made a radical shift towards my political attitude. And I started to question, what does it mean to be Oromo, to not be Oromo? And who is an enemy of Oromo? Because we have been informally have been told like that. As Oromo, we have enemies, and those enemies are explained with coded names, Naftanya and the Wayani at that time. And I didn't know that Naftanya means Amharas, and that also includes Orthodox Christians. And after that, I highly traumatized, and my focus was became highly attached to the church. That is how I became diacon. And continuing my education, I joined university, studied political science and international relations. I also tried to read as much as possible for me on the Ethiopian history and the politics. Finally, I've understood that mainly the politics of Oromo is built upon the hatred for others than the love for our own people of Oromo, because I was reading to famous political elites of Oromos who have been teaching, doctors, professors in different universities inside the country, also abroad, in Western studies, America, Europe, and the other parts of the world as well. And our most of majority of political elites books and articles focusing on talking about the enemy again. We hardly find, or we may not find, about the development or how to change people's lives in politics. Everybody is talking about the enemy. So that is what I was encountering in my journalism career as well. And starting from that, in 2021, I've wrote the book Linda have been mentioned on the introduction, the የጀበዛበት የፖለቲካና ኢትዮጵያዊነት, which can be translated as the ethnic politics of Oromo and the Ethiopian nationalism or Ethiopian identity, which I try to argue or try to provoke discussions, dialogues on the danger I was seeing in the politics of the Oromo. But as a response for that book, after the publication of that book, after 2 months or 3 months after that publication of that book, being captured by security forces of federal civilians, and also some of them with military suits, uniform, and they took me to the jail. And that evening, the same evening, they start to interrogate me, to question who wrote that book, who is behind me, and some of them are speaking just personally as Amharas sponsoring me, or because I'm speaking for Amharas, because they are paying me or something like that. And those even including the church, what I'm talking about the church, about the Orthodox Christians, the priests who raised me, the golden priests of my childhood. At least five of them have been killed, murdered, including Memory Unenya, whom I love so much, and I have a lot of memory with him. He was one who introduced me to the church as a junior diacon, and we know that he was one pillar of our community's moral, and they killed him in a very cruel manner, and including those stories, they're arguing that I was speaking about Amharas, and I was replying that whether they are Amharas and whomever they are human beings, and everyone have to live freely their lives that have been given naturally. That was my stance, my response to them, but they was not ready to listen to me, and they just kept beating me and torturing me. Finally, I refused to respond, and one of them, I think my face was covered, and one of them kicked me on the head, and I fell back, and my skull was broken in 2 places, which I have still, especially the middle one, I have still the feeling, and the bone fracture is there for the back. And for that, I thank my God for this one, because I just shared the many thousands victims' pain with that. And I don't have any grievance for that. For that. And finally, I just want to bring two very specific stories, and I want to share those, the image if I'm allowed. Oh, I don't know. How can I share that image? Okay. Now, what we have been reporting when we are talking about the atrocities or killing of Orthodox Christians. So now you see this image. This is a story from the eastern RC zone of Shirka and the Nijalim Sintayo. He is from the village 10 kilometers away from the Gobesa main city of Shirka Wareda. He was only 9 years old, kidnapped with 31 people on September 2024, and his father couldn't make a payment of 300,000 as demanded for his freedom, and they kidnapped him. He had been endured hunger and torture for many days, and forced to walk more than 10 kilometers on his barefoot. And then finally, those whom have been with him as the witnesses, whom have been among those kidnapped peoples, as they reported, finally he couldn't able to walk anymore because he was hungry and he was tired. And then the kidnappers, after some discussion, they just slaughtered him and they left him dead at Gobesa, main city of the Shirka. And he's only 9 years old. So that is what you can see, how the genocide against Orthodox Christians and Amharas in Oromia region kills the future of, targets the future of the society, as children are the future of the society. And it doesn't stop there. This is Father Asad Obito. Again, the image. Yeah. Oh, are you seeing Father Asad Obito's picture, Asad Pomopria's picture? Is it one? But yeah, that's what on the screen, yes? Yes, Father Asad Pomopria is from Merti of Eastern RC zone, again, where the killing of Orthodox Christians have been intensified even as we speak. Even today, there was a mass killing report from there. Father Asad Pomopria was a beloved father of Merti Abomsa City Medhania Church. And in 2025, Easter, during the Easter night, in the middle of the service, he just felt something and told his fellow priests who have been serving with him he have to go to home and to see his family. And he went back home. When he reached home, everyone is peace, and he was then decided to go back to the church. But immediately the gate was knocked, and his older son went out to check. Then they saw a gunfire. Then he ran out. When he ran out, he saw that his son was captured, and he just entered in the middle of the gunshot and able to get out his son, but he gave himself to them instead of them taking his son. And then they took him away. They kidnapped Father Salvo. And in that morning, they have asked about 500,000 for his freedom. The family have sold what he has, and all the community make a share. And then they paid what had been asked, but fathers at Oromo haven't been thinking that day till today. It is becoming a year, and his wife is suffering now mental illness from that. And for every word people ask her, she just says, "Where is my priest? Please bring back my priest." That is her word. That is what she is not speaking any other words as the information I'm getting from there till now shows that. And that is what we are witnessing day by day. And my fear, finally, what I want to stress on this is, while we are reporting at least one mass massacre of Orthodox Christians and Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo faithfuls for the past 8 years, the government and the mainstream media are occupied with the talking and or working on the beautification of the city. And most of major Western medias are not talking about the Orthodox Christians' persecutions and the war against Amhara. I'm really glad that they selectively report what is happening on Ethiopia, on some parts, even if not data on the war, even if there is some small happening, they just intensively report on that. But where there is huge violence against humanity, we are witnessing silence, and that makes me to fear more, to worry more. We are normalizing silence in atrocities. And as an Oromo and who tries to closely understand the politics of Oromo, I fear the worst is yet to come, because the promise in the politics of the Oromo is not to develop and to change the Oromia and the Oromos for better life, but rather the promise is to eliminate the enemies. And every politician, every activist to become prominent in between the society, he has to carry this agenda. And that is what makes my fear for the future even worse. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Yosef. Thank you so much for sharing those personal stories and giving visibility to the targeting of the church and the trauma of childhood as well, and the children, the involvement of children in this story. And I also, horrific story, and also the perspective of, choosing cruelty over humanity. You mentioned this, that, why are we choosing cruelty over humanity? And nothing shows that more so than children, when children are slaughtered and sacrificed. But thank you for sharing the targeting of the church. And now we're going to say Kaya to Birhan, Dr. Birhan, who's going to tell us the perspective from women. Again, a different kind of targeting of cruelty over humanity. Recently, Amnesty International has released a report titled "No One Came to My Rescue: Gang Rape, Sexual Slavery, and Mass Displacement of Women in Oromo, I can't say it, Yosef, Oromia, Ethiopia."
Oromia.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your help. In November last year, BBC World published a report showing systemic sexual abuse against the Amhara women. As a medical doctor who worked with the survivors, might you share with us, Dr. Birhan, what you have seen, heard, and some of what you've experienced? How are Amhara women and girls subjected to this abhorrent violence in Ethiopia? Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Linda. And thank you to the Australian Council for Human Rights Education and Center for Human Rights Education for organizing this important panel and for granting me the opportunity to participate as a panelist. I'm honored to share my experience with a sincere hope that this discussion will help shed a light on the grave human rights violation in Ethiopia against Amhara people. And it's my aspiration that raising awareness through forums such as this will contribute to a greater understanding and a meaningful action. So as you already mentioned, Linda, I have worked at the military medical system under the Ministry of Defense. So I've worked at Kombolcha Level 3 Defense Referral Hospital under the Ministry of Defense, and also at a civilian hospital in the Comprehensive Specialized Hospital. And I worked at these hospitals during the time the conflict in Amhara region was escalating and the area was under a state of emergency. So during this time, I have witnessed firsthand the suffering of Amhara people, the severe violation they faced simply because of their ethnic identity. And I also personally endured harm for adhering to my professional ethics as a physician and for refusing to participate in a system that weaponized human suffering for political control. So during my work at Kombolcha Level 3 Defense Referral Hospital, one of the human rights violation I observed was related to the sexual and reproductive health of women and their rights associated with that. So on numerous occasions, women learned of their pregnancies during consultation with me for unrelated medical conditions, and almost immediately this woman begged me not to document their pregnancies in their medical files, and they explained that confidentiality within the medical system did not exist, and their pregnancy information was routinely reported directly to their commanding officers without their consent. And these women were consistently disclosed that once their commanders learned their pregnancy, they were compelled and forced to undergo abortion against their will. And refusal was never treated as an option, and they had no control over decisions concerning their own reproductive health. So through repeated patterns and my own observation, I confirmed that these reports were true. And I raised my concern to the medical director, and I was told the issue was now my concern, and shortly thereafter I was removed from all duties related to medical and child health, as well as the psychiatric wing of the hospital. So this is an evidence that shows any ethical objection is not tolerated by the government. The other one was I also evaluated a number of female soldiers who reported being subjected to repeated sexual violence by their superiors and fellow personnel. And this woman told me that they were prohibited from reporting the assaults through any official channel, and any attempt to do so would result in retaliation rather than protection. So under accepted medical standards, as we know, healthcare providers are required to document injuries, preserve evidence, and ensure the survivors of the sexual violence receive appropriate medical and psychological care. However, in the military system, these documentations were discouraged and prevented, and survivors were denied any evidentiary medical records, and they were never given access to trauma-informed psychiatric care, including treatment for PTSD and other related issues. Me and together with my team, we have raised these concerns to the administration, and I was explicitly instructed not to interfere. This further confirms that the system was designed to conceal abuse rather than protect the victims. The other thing, in the military hospital, one of the heartbreaking realities outside of the gender-based violence was I encountered the presence of child soldiers, children forced or tricked into the war. They could never understand. Many of them, they arrived at the hospital with injuries. Their bodies were clearly not equipped to handle. They often suffer from severe malnutrition and psychological trauma in addition to the wounds they survived. And some of these children confided in me that they had been misled by the system. They were promised educational programs or care only to be coerced into the military service and sent to the front lines without their consent. And these were children as young as 14 and 13-year-old. So I specifically remember a 14-year-old child soldier who died of heart failure secondary to severe anemia after he had been promised a summer educational program, and he was instead forced into the war. Seeing these children struggle, knowing how easily they were exploited and made the human cost of the conflict painfully real, and no child should ever have to face conditions like that. The other experience I had was regarding civilian patients or civilian individuals. The system labeled as FANO or anti-peace. So while working in the hospital, even in the emergency department, we were given instructions to deny medical care to civilians with life-threatening injuries. Bullet wounds to the chest, to the abdomen, and these are patients who need immediate intervention where every second counts. And for me, this was one of the most disturbing experience of my care. Being told not to help someone in front of me who could die at any moment, while being in a hospital surrounded by professionals who were capable and willing of providing care. So this was definitely against the international humanitarian law and also the medical ethical principles. So me personally, I refused to follow these orders, and I managed the patients and referred them to the next level of care despite the clear instruction from the medical directors and higher military officials. And taking this action, I faced severe consequences. I was labeled as anti-peace, and I was accused of being a member of the rival group in the region, and I was unlawfully detained for several days. And during this detention, I was subjected to physical and psychological harm, and held in a condition that was inhuman. And all of this occurred simply because I acted according to my professional duty and the principles of international humanitarian law. But this experience of mine is not unique, because there is a well-documented systematic crackdown against the health professionals by the Ethiopian government related to the ongoing conflict in Amhara region. The government targets and accuse medical professionals simply for upholding their medical ethics and providing medical care to those who are in need. So many doctors, nurse, and medical staff were accused of supporting the anti-peace group, and they have faced threats, harassment, or worse, merely for adhering to the same standard that defines ethical medicine worldwide. And this, in short, was my some of the experience I had while working for the under the Ministry of Defense at a military defense hospital. We only have 10 minutes, but the human rights violation and the suffering of Amhara people occurring in Amhara is very severe, and it's reflected in everyday life of every Amhara people. I also worked as a lecturer and a researcher at the ዩኒቨርሲቲ College of Medicine and Health Science, and I also have several experience related to Amhara students who are suffering from this conflict and the government targeting Amhara people. And again, thank you for giving me this chance.
Thank you, Dr. Birhan. Thank you so much for sharing that testimony with us. And it's not easy to bear witness and in your role, in your job, and then to stand up for your ethics and care responsibilities and human rights. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Dr. Birhan. And now over to Rebel. Also, Dr. Rebel, your work with the Amhara Association of America, an independent organization that records human rights violations against Amharas in Ethiopia. Based on your testimony recording in the last 3 years, would you be able to give us a summary of the status of human rights situation of Amharas as you have uncovered with your work with AAA, and also tell us where people can get information about the issue if we want to have more of a visibility to this hidden, largely hidden story of gross human rights violations that we've heard about today. Thank you, Rebel.
Thank you so much, Dr. Blanchard. If I could kindly ask, would it be okay if I just share my screen? I just have a few slides I wanted to share just to help aid my presentation. Let's see. Okay. Can everyone see my slides? Are they visible? Okay, excellent. So I want to start by thanking the co-hosts of this very important event, the ACHRE and the CHRE at Curtin University. It's a very important event, and truthfully, it's just been an honor to hear from all of the panelists. Very, very moving testimony. What I'm going to be presenting is going to be a little bit different, given that I was not someone who experienced this stuff personally, but rather more of a analyst and researcher and casualty recorder, just highlighting some trends in terms of data from the organization. So a little bit about AAA, as Dr. Blanchard outlined, this is an advocacy organization that engages with policymakers tracking conflict, violence, and political repression in Ethiopia and sharing data and educating them. Specifically on the Amhara War, there's a dedicated initiative that AAA has put together called Amhara War Updates. This was in response to demands from various international observers who simply did not know what was happening in the region since the start of the war. And so this initiative tracks human rights violations on a daily basis, as well as the actual war itself. So Ethiopia at a glance, it's a very diverse country, population of about 138 million based on the latest estimates. So this is the second most populous country in the continent. Many ethnic groups allow diversity in religion as well. But unfortunately, the politics of identity has reigned supreme over the past several decades. So we have consecutive regimes which have imposed these very divisive policies. And my colleagues, I think, did this section justice. I won't spend too much time explaining the background of this. But just to highlight that identity commonly underpins all of the conflict, the violence, and the political repression that we document as AAA. The political context, again, very, very brief. Since 2018, we've had the regime of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed Ali, the Prosperity Party regime, which is dominated by the Oromo wing, so the Oromo Prosperity Party regime. This was replacing the previous TPLF-dominated regime. However, in terms of policy, little has changed. So we still see state repression, polarization, and violence. And specifically over the past 5 to 6 years, we've seen back-to-back wars. And unfortunately, across these wars, the Amhara region was an epicenter in both cases. So essentially, we have about 5 years of unabated war and then targeting of Amhara communities elsewhere in the country as well. So what makes the Amhara genocide unique is that you have something where a population is targeted in various geographic locations within this country that they're indigenous to, and then you have multiple actors involved, so both state and non-state actors over a prolonged period of time. So what we're going to be focusing is really just on the past 3 years. But as my colleagues had mentioned, this is something that goes back, easily to the early 90s, if not even before that. So just a little bit about AAA's human rights monitoring work and methodology. This is data that's collected by a team of paid human rights consultants. The funding is based on community donations. So we're an independent advocacy organization. There's no, states or anything involved. These are community donations. It's very grassroots. And so it's a small team of consultants, but we're able to do a lot with this small team. But just in terms of the data, it's important to note that it's not exhaustive of all incidents. So this is just what we as a small organization recording casualties are able to verify. And so it can be considered that this is more of identifying patterns of the violations and trends rather than the full extent of the numbers and the casualties. But the work is based on primary sources, so where possible, direct witness testimony through field and remote interviews. And this is supplemented by secondary sources where applicable with very rigorous quality check mechanisms. And so we have casualty recording based on incidents. So sometimes these could be massacres, sometimes these could be, isolated incidents in various parts of the country. And so we document instances of physical harm as well as possible arrests, abductions, or anything related to that. But there's also at times systemic tolls that emerge in terms of large-scale displacements and then impacts on access to facilities, including basic education, healthcare, and beyond. But for the purposes of this presentation, I'm going to be very brief, although there's much to talk about. So in terms of casualty recording, this is a figure that looks at over a 12-month period from August 2023 to August 2024. And it just gives you a sense of the extent of casualties in just various zones of the Amhara region, as well as just a couple in the neighboring Oromia region in relation to this war. And this is specifically just casualties from civilian massacres. So importantly, we're seeing a very large scale of atrocities over the course of the war. We're talking in the range of tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands. What's been emerging over the past few years as well is how state security forces, so this is the national army and then regional counterparts, emerging as the primary perpetrator of these civilian casualties in the Amhara region. Previously, a lot of this was being carried out also by non-state actors, but now the proportion has shifted so that the state itself has become the primary abuser of these violations, which come in the context of war crimes, crimes against humanity, and there's much to be said about that. But again, these estimates are just the tip of the iceberg. So it's very difficult for us to get the full extent of what the casualties are, given access restrictions in the area. And again, looking at the perpetrators, the primary perpetrators in much of the cases are actually the federal defense forces. So this is the national army, which is in place to actually protect citizens doing the opposite of what it's supposed to be doing. And we have pictured here the logo as well as the top military official in the country, Field Marshal Burhanu Jula, which on numerous occasions has appeared on state media, either justifying or denying what's been happening to these civilian populations in the context of this war. So it's very serious. There's a combination of heavy artillery shelling at times, aerial strikes through the use of drones and other technologies, setting homes and buildings on fire with residents inside, door-to-door operations, and the list goes on. And there's many faces behind these numbers. So it's sometimes when we talk about these numbers, it feels like, it's becoming, there's a sense of detachment from the livelihoods of these individuals. But this is just a small sample of just, 11 victims here that we've managed to photograph just within a 12-month period. And so these are everyday people, civilians, some of them medical professionals, some of them, humanitarian workers, people from different walks of life who were targeted for their Amhara identity in the context of this war. And it goes to show that there's more to these numbers than just the numbers themselves. These are not just statistics, these are humans, and it's so important to ground ourselves in that when we conduct this advocacy. Just focusing just very briefly on the toll of the drone warfare in this war. Unfortunately, a large proportion of these attacks have actually targeted civilian gatherings, health centers, schools, ambulances, residential homes, sometimes even food supplies. And these have led to very extensive civilian casualties. So this is on the order of hundreds of drone and air strikes in the Amhara region. This graph from a report from a couple years ago just shows within a 12-month period what we were able to document in terms of civilian casualties across various zones of the Amhara region, as well as one zone in the neighboring Oromia region, where this war has also encompassed. And the drones used have been supplied to the ENDF from various foreign countries, including Turkey, China, and Iran. And more recently, there's also reports of potential domestic production by the Abiy Ahmed administration themselves. And so this goes to show you that the toll of deadly drone warfare has been very extensive in this war as a primary means of inflicting civilian casualties. On sexual and gender-based violence, this has been one of the most underreported aspects of this war. It's been devastating. Recent reports from various organizations and medias have outlined some figures, but these are very, very limited. For example, a recent BBC report identified thousands of cases just based on a small sample of health centers, about 4% of health centers in the region. And this, when this is looked at, the findings were very disturbing. 45% of cases involving children under the age of 18, and over half of the victims testing positive for sexually transmitted infections. So what's happening is really the weaponization of sexual violence against these civilian populations by state security forces. So it goes to show that there is this intention of deliberately inflicting harm on a collective basis in the most horrific ways imaginable. And we don't fully know the extent, but based on this sample, if this is extrapolated, we're looking at easily upwards of 100,000 cases. So this is about 100 cases per day. And it's important to note that these medical centers have limited capacity to support victims. And in many cases, victims do not seek medical care due to fear of social stigma or, potentially the feelings of shame and the psychological toll that's inflicted. And these are sometimes young girls, women, sometimes even boys and men. And it's very, very horrific. Moving on, we have the profiling, arrests, and disappearances. Again, people are being targeted for their Amhara identity. This is just a partial list of some of the high-profile political prisoners detained since the state of emergency, or sometimes sometimes shortly before that. Victims are arrested, they're disappeared, they're taken hostage. There's been cases of forced military conscription after abductions. Initially, the arrests targeted human rights defenders, so prominent media workers, independent, especially civil society leaders, and then eventually it expanded to the wider public. And so this was profiling based on ethnic identity, or in some cases, political belief. So these are people, in some cases, who are suspected of being critics of the Abiy Ahmed administration. The violations include physical and psychological torture, denial of legal counsel in some cases, or obstruction from visitation by family members. So in some cases, even the family members of the victims did not know where their loved ones were. So there was maybe a report that they had heard that their loved one was taken away by sometimes non-uniformed individuals, and their whereabouts could be unknown for weeks, months, and sometimes even more than that. So there are many cases of just missing individuals whose whereabouts are not known. In many cases, they were taken to undisclosed or remote detention sites. Some of them were identified, but there are some which may not be known based on available information. And if we look at just media workers alone, the Ethiopian press freedom defenders had previously reported that between 2019 and 2024, just within a 5-year span, there were over 244 arrests of over 201 journalists and media workers. So it's very plain to see that independent reporting has been under attack, and this is also connected with the desire for control and for monopolizing information flow. So it's a very serious problem. Furthermore, we have internal displacement. Internal displacement predated the wars, actually, with millions displaced since 2019 in the context of war and just outbreaks of ethnic violence in various parts of the country, where ethnic Amharas have been disproportionately targeted. So these are communities in the Oromia, the Benishangul Gumuz, and even the Amhara regions. Just recently, there was also a large-scale displacement from northeastern Amhara, from places in a territory known as Raya, including Alamata city, Raya Alamata, Koram, Wefla, Zata, and this is over 100,000 people. And this is just in January of this year. So this gives you a sense of this is an ongoing issue, and there hasn't been a solution to prevent such displacement from recurring. These internally displaced individuals face numerous challenges. Many of them are vulnerable members of vulnerable groups. So these could be expecting mothers and children, seniors, sometimes people with disabilities, and importantly, they often lack protection, but also access to shelter, food, water, and other essential items necessary for survival. And so we have no support from the state, and unfortunately, in recent years, dwindling support from international NGOs, which has created a very concerning gap. And of course, they also face intimidation and sometimes extortion from officials who are supposed to be looking after them, and that is very serious as well. The impact on education. This war has devastated the regional educational system, leaving more than 9 million children out of school. I'm not going to go into all the statistics, but schools have been targeted, they've been bombed, they've been destroyed and repurposed for military use. And that is really, really hurting the young generation in the region. And sorry, 9 million is the figure for the country, but the largest toll is in the Amhara region, where more than 4.4 million children are out of school. Sorry, just a correction there, with over 6,000 forced to close. The impact on healthcare, as we heard, has been very devastating. Pictured here, we have a health professional in Bahar Dar city who was just murdered in February of this year, Dr. Tsegahun Sime. The WHO also issued a statement referencing this incident. He was killed by state forces based on currently available information. Other organizations have also reported on this. So medical professionals are subject to killings and abductions. There have been attacks on medical centers, denial of access to the public, and this has been an ongoing trend that's also very concerning. We have communication blackouts, so mobile internet and telecommunications shutdowns. These are networks operated by the state, and so unfortunately, this control of information has been weaponized in the context of this war, hindering information flow to the public, so people are unaware of what's happening in different parts of the country. People are unable to reach loved ones and family members. And unfortunately for us, for people who are trying to identify these trends and record them, we're cut off from investigations during these periods. And this has been a very concerning trend as well. There's a number of causes. I'm not going to go into it over here, but just to give you a sense, it all stems from from systemic issues. I'm going to wrap up. Sorry.
That's okay.
You have a state that's very repressive, that has shown bad faith and lack of credibility in past failed peace deals. Unfortunately, there's a cycle of impunity, and we need more attention from the international community to really pressure this regime to start to at least show some small steps towards coming towards peace. Otherwise, we're in store for a terrible trend. And so a number of recommendations for different actors, African Union, different influential countries, global human rights organizations. Everyone can do their part. So hopefully these slides will be made available. I'm not going to go through this. Some major reports that people can access from our organization. So all of this is published on our website, www.amharaamerica.org. Or if anybody wants to get in touch with me, I'm happy to share these reports as well. But we're constantly doing our best to track this. And we have a number of documentaries that are also available, including the one that my colleague Graham will share. So these are very important resources, which also tell the story from the perspective of survivors, making them very powerful and maybe more relatable than the statistics themselves. And finally, again, our website is right there. Email info@amharaamerica.org. And this is how people can get in touch and learn more about the situation. Sorry if I went on for too long. Thank you so much, everyone.
Brilliant. Thank you, Rebel. And congratulations again on your recent doctorate. Well done with getting your PhD. And all of this information is absolutely brilliant in terms of human rights education. So we will ask you for your slides and references and resources to put on the website, that we'll have a section on this story that's largely unknown in Australia and certainly in Australian schools. So now the good segue, you ended on documentary resources there, 2 documentary films, and you mentioned your colleague Graham. So our final speaker is Graham, who's in 2023 made an award-winning documentary, We're Still Breathing, Amhara Genocide in Ethiopia. Just wondering if Graham can walk us through the film and tell us some of the experiences of the people you interviewed, and why we all must watch your film. 10 minutes would be great, Graham, so that we can have a few minutes for discussion and questions. Thank you.
Well, you should have all watched the film by now. I'm surprised you haven't already watched it, everybody. But thank you very much for inviting me to take part in this. Yeah, I went in 2020. I'd written quite a lot about the persecution of the Amhara people late 2022 and early 2023. And then with the support, I was approached by AAA in the spring of 2023 and asked if I would go to Ethiopia and make a documentary about what was happening. So we then spent a number of months planning it. It was cancelled 2 or 3 times because it wasn't safe for me to go. And eventually I went in June and spent some time in an internal displacement camp in the Amhara region. So it's when you think of when somebody talks of an internal displacement camp, you may have an image in your mind of rows of UNICEF and rows of UNHCR canvas tents and facilities and support and so on. So most refugee camps that I've worked in are not like that at all. And the camps, in inverted commas, that displaced Amhara communities were living in Ethiopia were not like that either. The one that I went to was an industrial unit, or a series of large industrial units. If you think of a sort of, I don't know, an Amazon type warehouse, metal structure, no light, and there were two of these large buildings. And when I first went there, we went through there's one small door, went in through the door, and then you couldn't see much because it was so dark inside, because there's no light in these places. And then the only light source was from the door. Occasionally people would have solar lamps individually. And then once one's eyes sort of accustomed to the darkness, I could just see piles and piles and piles of stuff, people's belongings. And I thought, to begin with, that it was a storage unit. And then I could see that in between the stuff, there were people, families, individuals, children, lots and lots and lots of children. You know, there's loads of children in Ethiopia. I think 40% of the population is under 17 or something. So there's huge numbers of children everywhere. So there were lots and lots of children. So people would be living, in inverted commas, in these spaces, and they would have their belongings and their bed, you know, sort of sponge mattress that they're sleeping on. And right next to them, literally right next to them, with no dividing space, would be another family or another group of people who they didn't know until they arrived in the camp. I met, and then I spent sort of 4 or 5 days there, so not very long really, but you know, we couldn't stay for too long, because if we drew attention to ourselves, then it wouldn't be safe, certainly for me, to be there. Most journalists, you know, lots of journalists who have spoken out about the atrocities that are taking place have been suddenly whisked off and disappear. Well, actually, interestingly, before, I think 2 or 3 weeks before I went, the woman who was in place to work with me as the translator was an Amhara activist, and she was one day just taken from her home in front of her children. And so we didn't have so I arrived and no translator was there, no logistics were in place. So yes, 4 or 5 days. I conducted sort of very intense, long interviews with 4 different people, but I spoke to nearly 60, I guess. There was about between 500 and 700 people in the camp, I would estimate. You know, there's nothing to do, there's no work, there's no school, so people have, you know, there's no sanitation. So it's an awful place to be, on top of the trauma that people have experienced that have led them to end up in this place. Everybody that I met had been displaced from the Oromo region. And at the time when I was there, the estimates were that since 2018, around 2 million people had been displaced. 2 million Amhara people had been displaced from Oromia. So numbers are difficult to get, but it's a huge number of people. Around 50,000 people were estimated to have been killed at the time when I was there. And huge numbers, hundreds of thousands, 300,000-400,000 people falsely arrested and imprisoned in, places, not proper prisons even, just taken off somewhere you don't know where they are. So I met 4 people that we spent quite a long time talking to. A young mother with 3 children who gave us the name of the film, actually, in her testimony, a very tearful testimony. She talked about witnessing the death of her parents and her husband in front of her. And she can't have been more than 21, 22, I would imagine. And she has 3 children. She described how women were attacked systematically, pregnant women particularly, and the fetus would be killed. She was very, very, very traumatized. Could barely speak a lot of the time. So she now is on her own. She has the responsibility of 3 children to look after somehow, who different ages, obviously. One very small up to, I think the oldest one was probably 5. So no education for the children. We met a boy. Well, I say boy, he was 21, I think, who was attacked with a machete. He said a group of, it's difficult, from what everybody has said, it's difficult to identify who's carrying out a lot of these attacks, it seems to me. And the people that I spoke to would point towards the Shenne. They could say it's the Shenne, by which they meant the Oromo Liberation Army. But then you would hear accounts of people being attacked by men in uniform, wearing the insignia of the Oromo Special Forces, or even the EPRDF forces. So it's very difficult to be clear who's doing what, and even more difficult to understand why they're doing it, seems to me, other than a deep-seated tribal hatred, which comes from who knows where. Just at that point, just a slight interjection, I'll come back to the film, that it's, we are living in a time where tribal nationalism is growing in intensity and spreading throughout the world. And what's taking place in Ethiopia is a form of tribal nationalism. And it's being fueled and facilitated and strengthened by what's taking place globally. It's becoming legitimate to be a tribal nationalist, to be a far-right, intolerant, racist, which is what's happening in mainstream politics all over the world. So the boy said he was in his village, the EPRDF came one day, or the federal forces. So we don't really know who. Men in uniform, we could say, and attacked and killed Amhara people. And often when this happens, the Amhara people have been living as neighbors to Oromo communities for generations. I mean, I met an old man, his wife, he's Amhara, his wife was Oromo. His children were shot in front of him. And the they're living in small communities. They would describe them as villages, towns, and so on. And it's often when the federal forces would turn up at these places, they don't know who the Amhara are. And it's the neighbors who point them out. And so it's, they live there, they live there, they live there, they live there. So it's similar to the pogroms that took place in the Second World War, actually, because that's what happened throughout Germany. So the Amhara were slaughtered, and the boy had his right arm amputated with a machete, and he was left for dead. They must have thought he would just bleed out and die, but miraculously he didn't, and he survived and was taken to a hospital and found his way to the camp. But when I say survived, he's physically alive, but he is absolutely hollowed out. He was, there was, I've worked with thousands of marginalized communities and living awful lives and so on, but I haven't seen many people traumatized to the point where it's almost like the life have been, it's almost like the life has been drawn out of them. And that's what it was like. He was absolutely in pieces. His father had had a nervous breakdown and had run off. Nobody knew where he was. And his mother was in a constant state of depression or anxiety or hysteria So, this is something that an aspect of, because the suffering in situations like this is so intense and the physical needs are so great, that it's often overlooked the impact that things have on people's mental health. We talk about mental health, it's like a luxury. Everybody's got anxiety and depression in the West, but the level of trauma that's experienced by people who go through situations like this is, undescribable and destroys their life and the lives of those who come behind them. Generations. This is generational trauma that's being created. So we spoke to the boy, and that was very difficult for everybody. Most difficult for him, really. And then we spoke to this lovely, lovely old man who, well, I say old man, he was probably my age, but he may have been a little bit older than me. And he talked about the history and how they came to live there, and and all that was very interesting. Apparently, after the conflict with the Italians, that Amhara soldiers who'd fought for the country against the Italians were given land in Oromia. Robel, you can correct me if I'm wrong, or just wave your finger at me. And that's how a lot of people came to live in that region. And his grandfather had lived there, and then his father, and now he'd lived there with his family. And the thing that was, over and above the awful stories, the Oromia Special Forces arrived one day and killed two of his sons in front of him, tried to shoot him. He managed to hide, and the third son was injured but survived. And this man had a home, he had land, he had a business, he'd built a good life for himself and his family. So all that's gone. The home is just taken. When we say 2 million people displaced, that means 2 million people have lost their homes, they're homeless, they're destitute, and their homes have been appropriated by somebody else. that's what happens. And 2 or 3 years ago, maybe it was 2 years ago, the government came up with this brilliant plan to send people back to the places that they came from, empty the displacement camps and send them home, with no consideration for A, was it safe? And B, did they have a home to go to? Which they didn't have a home to go to, because the home there was now an Oromo family living in it, probably. So he was really lovely and quite sort of sanguine, but he'd lost everything, and him and the young woman with the 3 children, they were both not just distraught and upset with the loss and everything, they were perplexed. They didn't understand how you could, but we've lived together always. These are our friends, these are our neighbors, this is my wife. What we don't understand, they just did not understand how this could have happened, because they were family. So that's probably my time, isn't it? I'll stop happily. Everybody should see the film, not because I've made it, because I don't care who made it, but everybody should see the film. It's I've listened to everybody today, and in many ways, yes, it's moving, but it's, in my experience, the most moving way to talk about an enormous ethnic injustice that's taking place is through individuals. All the statistics, all the facts, all the numbers, interesting as they may be and horrifying as they are, the thing that engages people is our individual stories. And the film tells individual stories, and it should be shown to everybody. Congressmen, MPs, members of parliament, all human rights organizations should see it and should want to see it, because nobody knows about this. Outside of the Ethiopian community and those of us working with the Ethiopian community, and I've been writing about Ethiopia since 2012, nobody knows about it. And you say, oh, there's a genocide taking place in Ethiopia. Really? So the reason they don't know about it is the media doesn't talk about it. Western media, Western legacy media is an absolute disgrace anyway. And there's a lot of work being done by Ethiopian groups and Ethiopian media and so on, but often that is aimed at other Ethiopians, which is fine. But if the purpose of an event like this, and if the purpose of making a film, which my purpose in making the film was to raise awareness of an issue that's hidden, and I'm sure that's what we're all trying to do in our own way, then that requires stories and information being spread in a way that people will receive it, and that's not always easy. And I think that the last thing I would say is, if there's going to be long-term change in Ethiopia, it will have nothing to do with foreign intervention or the West. The West doesn't give a damn. The West bases its geopolitical decision-making on one thing only, which is self-interest. It will come from the Ethiopian people. And the answer against this rabid racism and this extremism in the world is cooperation and social unity.
We've got 3 minutes, Graham, to wrap up this.
That's enough.
So
That's
really
enough. That's enough. I'll finish on that. That's a
Okay.
good line to finish on.
Thank you.
Social unity, everyone.
Luckily, we didn't have any questions or comments in the
God, it's 2
in
o'clock.
the commentary because we've completely run out of time. But I'm not sure if anyone wanted to just have. I know everyone's been listening and patiently when all the contributors have been. We haven't got any comments or queries, so I can either just go to the thanks or there might be a last word from someone.
Can I make a very quick snap correction?
Of course you can, Sinead.
Yeah, I was just because a little bit earlier, excellent program with, all the panelists, everything really fits in.
Amazing.
It just shows all the gaps are filled from all the different experiences, and both from the desk research side and from the field experience as well. Just quickly earlier, Graham was talking about an anecdotal example of how one Amhara family got to that area, and then he was also asking an input from Robel. So I just wanted to quickly add that addendum to that. It is true there are so many different reasons why a lot of different people moved from place to place in Ethiopia. That one specific reason is not unidirectional. Before 1991, there was no ethnic ownership of any area that belongs to any specific ethnic group. During the monarchy, a portion of whenever there is war or whenever there is a national effort to defend the country, a portion of the force comes from the monarch, from the central forces, but almost all the time there is always volunteer forces that just literally called usually like it's called fanoism. So people sell their own cattle, their own business, and then just listen to the king, arrive to a certain center point and defend the country. So the people who are salaried, they already get their salaries. They are through the military system, but the volunteer, after victory, they get land. But that land, it depends on where they ended up, where the governors under which they went for the battle have land. So an Amhara could get a land in Wallagga, or a lot of Tigrayans and Oromos have got land in Gojam and Gondar and Wello as well, and Shawa, and even as far down as Bale, Arsi, Jimma. So during that time, it just depends on under which governor or king or queen or sultanate that you went to defend the country. It's just to really give that that context, and it's not really, it's anecdotal. It's not the case for how people settled from one place to one place. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sinead. Thank you. And thank you to everyone for contributing to the webinar this evening, especially to our panelists for sharing their, courageous and moving and painful stories and experiences, and giving visibility to what has been called the hidden genocide of Amhara. As human rights activists and advocates, and in solidarity, we need to listen deeply to these moving testimonies and facilitate speaking out against genocide everywhere, towards the Amhara in Ethiopia, the Rohingya in Myanmar, the blockade and displacement of Armenians, the ongoing violence and humanitarian crisis in Palestine. Genocide just wreaks havoc and insists on cruelty over humanity, and we need to stand up against it. Thank you to my colleagues, Azim and Yeager from the Centre for Human Rights Education, Curtin University, for really putting this event together and contacting our sensational panelists. What brilliant, diverse perspectives, and what passion for your work, all of you. And Graham, passionate about documentary. That's one form of raising awareness, and there are all of the other forms, and the brave work that people are doing on the ground or in diaspora, thank you for shedding light on this. And, you know, we've crossed several time zones tonight, and giving voice to this grave situation of human rights violation on this day of telling truth and giving dignity to people who are subject to gross human rights violations. And the story of the Amhara of Ethiopia, which is, of many of you have said, is unknown to many of us. And we're recording this in a way to try to raise awareness of the story. The recording and references will be available on the ACHRE and the ACHRE websites, and look forward to doing this again. We need to keep telling the stories, keep going with raising awareness. Thank you so much, everybody. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.